Hey there, you are listening to the Moxie Podcast, and I'm your host, Jenny Nuccio, global social entrepreneur who loves to do a lot of good in this world, and best known for being the founder and CEO of the Moxie Collective. This show started with the simple idea of shining light on ordinary people doing courageous things in this world, and over the years has grown to be a hub of not only courageous conversations, but resources, knowledge, and connection. From topics of sustainability to leadership to, of course, a good dose of social entrepreneurship. If you're looking to grow in your knowledge, develop as a leader, and create a ripple effect of impact in this world, then welcome, Changemaker. It is time to ignite your Moxie. Welcome to the Moxie Studio. So that's right, you heard me. This is the Moxie Studio, and this is now the official place where we record the Moxie Podcast. And we are now just not on audio. So if you're listening to us right now on audio, you can now find us on video on YouTube as we have officially launched our channel there. I am so excited about the changes that the Moxie Podcast is going towards and what we've been developing over the years. And we really want this to be a space that's not just about sharing stories, but also about educating. We started the Moxie Podcast back in 2019 to really build community. As a woman in Mombasa, I wanted to build community with women entrepreneurs. So that was actually the beginning roots of why the Moxie Podcast began. And now what I want within the community that we've been able to build, I want not only for that community to grow, but I want us to continue to be learners. I want us to continue to be challenged. And so this is going to be a space now where we're bringing topics across the board about leadership, entrepreneurship, social impact, collaborations, community, whatever that might be. We're going to bring it here in this studio on this podcast and start to dive deeper into some of the themes of these certain topics. How can we learn? How can we get better? And more so, how can we continue to do that together? So welcome to the Moxie Studio and welcome to the new format and series of the Moxie Podcast. Let's hop in. All right, everybody, we are back. Last time you heard from me, we were taking the Moxie Podcast on the road. And in fact, right before that, we were on a pretty extended break. We last recorded back in December. We're on an extended break. I decided to jump forward with the Moxie Podcast before we got to this moment. So if you're joining us on YouTube, I really hope that you have dug deep into other Moxie Podcast episodes. And if not, go check out Moxie Podcast. We've been around since 2019, and there is a lot of goodness on the radio waves. Do we still call it that? Radio waves? I'm not sure. A lot of goodness out there in the audio format, and we're excited for this new format of video. So if you're listening to us on any, again, audio format, what is it? iTunes, Google Play, all the things. You can also find us on our YouTube channel and just search the Moxie Podcast. So we are now in September. The original plan was actually to start in August, but plans are plans, and it didn't go according to my plan. So we are now here in September. I am so excited to talk about a lot of my favorite topics. So most of you know me as Dr. Jenny Nuccio and as a social entrepreneur. I have been in business for 10 plus years, grew a global social enterprise. We started as a nonprofit, moved into a hybrid, and we now sell all over the world, mainly known for our Moxie Kids brand. But a Moxie Collective is a multi-brand. We're faceted with a lot of brands. So we're a conglomerate. I can never say that word. We are an accumulation of brands from Moxie Kids, Sukwa Saddle Blankets, the Moxie Podcast, Jenny Nuccio brand, as well as future brands we have launching in the future. Selah, also Amani Soko in Kenya. There's a lot that we do. So go check out amanicollective.com and you'll learn a little bit more about us. But the reason I give you that brief history is because this month we are going to talk about social impact. We're going to talk about the why behind social impact. When did we start talking about it? When did we start caring about it? So that's what we're going to do today. And then in the coming weeks, we're going to talk about the what. What is the system and the model that actually makes social impact happen? So a lot of the times we hear this as social enterprise. So we'll be digging deeper into that next week. Then we're going to talk about the who, which we call the social entrepreneur. So if you identify as an entrepreneur and you do really good things in the world with your business, then you might actually be surprised that you can and potentially moving forward will identify as a social entrepreneur. Gets a little bit confusing, so we're going to dig deeper into that too. And then we're going to end with the how. The how is some of my favorite things to talk about because that is encompassed in your leadership. It's how you show up for the world. It's how you show up in community. And so we're going to talk about what it means to be an ethical impact leader, what it means to show ethical impact, what is the definition of that, and again, give some case studies and example. But let's circle back and talk about now. Talk about the why. So social impact is it's a kind of a funny terminology because social impact in the beginning really started, a lot of people will say it started in the CSR department of organizations and companies, people wanting to understand corporate sustainability responsibility. They knew that they needed to be responsible for some sort of sustainable initiatives. But the funny part too is they didn't know what sustainable meant. And we put together a lot of these plans and it kind of just stayed internal and didn't really leave the walls of corporate. But really where social impact started is back in the 80s. And it started with ethical. It started with this term, what does it mean to treat someone in an ethical manner? What does it mean to have dignified work? We say at Amani Collective, we create consistent, dignified work. And I get a lot of questions of like, what does it mean to have dignified work? Why do you use that specific term? And so ethical, it started in the 80s because it was really looking at the workspace. It was understanding when people come to work, what is that culture? But even culture is a little bit deeper than what they were talking about. Ethical started really surface. They just wanted to make sure people were getting paid right and that they were also safe in the environment that they were working in. We can see a lot of case studies, and in months to come, we're going to actually dig deep into some case studies of fast fashion and some people who use greenwashing and their sustainable marketing and all of these really great topics that I'm excited to bring to this platform. So we'll get there, but what ethical in the workspace really is intended to be is to just make sure people are safe. And what I want to ensure in ethical impact as we go a little bit deeper. So this started in the 80s. Ethical is not a regulated term. People can say they're an ethical company, but there's no certifications in actually using that term. So you can utilize that term in a lot of your website content, a lot of your social media marketing. But to actually know if a company is ethical, you really kind of have to look at their supply chain and understand their workforce. Then in the 90s, we started hearing this term called fair trade. And fair trade is actually going a little bit deeper. There are certifications in that, and they want to make sure that there is a fair trade for the actual product that is coming back to the consumer. And it really started in agriculture. We saw with cocoa, we saw with coffee, these large multinational organizations that were buying mainly in around West Africa were cutting cost, extremely cutting cost. And because of course, a multinational organization, a company, profit is their number one gain, right? Profit is their number one priority. So they were cutting extreme costs. They weren't paying a fair rate for the actual product in hand. And what this created was more than just being underpaid, but it started creating bad working conditions again. It started creating modern day slavery, child slavery, misuse of just humanity, because organizations and companies in these countries, specifically West Africa, beyond, and even in, you can look South America, Central America, really wanted these contracts. They wanted the consistency of making sure that they were the main exporter for these big multinational organizations. And they would do anything and take anything to make sure that they got that contract. And in the end, in reality, it's not good business 101 for them. They were getting really, really, really bad rates for that trade. And then they were doing extreme things to make sure that they were keeping that contract, again, with child labor, modern day slavery, cutting cost and supply, and etc. So fair trade came into place in the 1990s to make sure that we were We were looking at all of the pieces of our supply chain, and that we were actually and adequately paying the supplier for that product at the right rate. Now, fair trade, although it is a certification, although it does allow a little bit more credibility, there's still limitations to that because it's just a trade and it happens one time. And I talk a lot about what does it look like to be sustainable in your systems for long term. And some of that has to do with partnerships. How are we creating long-term partnerships for that to happen? How are we creating long-term partnerships so that when someone gets that fair trade, that it doesn't just happen once and that they don't see that trade and that money again? This is where social impact comes in play, because it's more than just ethical. It's more than just fair trade, right? We're looking at the whole well-being of that individual. We want to take a wraparound approach to making sure that we're caring for people in their workspaces. Not just that they're safe, not that they're just getting paid a fair wage, but that they truly are growing in their self-efficacy and their confidence, and that they are changing the generational wealth of their family. And the only way to do that is to fully show up in yourself, is to fully challenge the systems as the entrepreneur yourself. We have to understand that even running a business, it can't always be about profit. We have to make sure we're caring for the people, that we're creating a culture that is cultivated in, I want to say uniqueness, but also just cultivated in the right heart space. We also have to make sure that we are paying attention to the environment and how we were outsourcing and how we are also inputting and all the different things that make our business run. How can we do better? That's always a question we're asking within our company. And we also have to pay attention to our purpose and our partnerships. We will only succeed and become better if we continue to challenge the status quo of what is happening. We want to challenge it. And sometimes being a challenger is not always the fun way to go. Doing good is not always easy, but doing good is right. And so we want to ensure that when we are doing good in our company, when we are doing good in communities, that we are taking that extra step of effort to do that. I want to give you a quick statistic. As an entrepreneur and starting a business, it normally takes a good 3 to 5 years till you are sustainable and profitable. As an entrepreneur that cares about social impact, so we'll say social entrepreneur, social enterprise, it normally takes you a good 8 to 10 years to be sustainable and profitable. If you are thinking about stepping into this game, if you're already in this game, this is the long game. And you need to build resiliency in order to take and continue to take those steps. It is not for people with faint hearts. So I don't say that to scare you. I actually say that to challenge you. Let's not cut corners. Let's not try to just take the easy road. Let's take the road less traveled. Let's challenge the status quo. Let's be better. Let's look back at the 80s when they started questioning ethics. They started questioning workspaces. Let's look at the 90s when they actually started paying attention to the trade. Let's look at now and in the early 2000s and moving in 2010 and 2011 when we actually started to ask where our clothes came from. What is on our backs? Where is it made? What resources is it coming from? These are the questions we need to continue to ask to only be better for ourselves now and for the future generations to come. We have one planet that we live in, but we are all human and we are all connected just by the sake of humanity. So how are we coming together? How are we creating social impact on a global scale? And how are you creating systems in a way that it's going to be sustainable long after you are gone? The rest of this month, we're going to talk about social impact in the who, in the social entrepreneur, in the what, in the social enterprise, and in the how, in your ethical impact practices. I want you to continue to be challenged in this, to grow in this, and never settle for complacency. But always listen to the voices unheard and keep pushing into spaces, keep pushing into the next day, keep rising up so that we can make this place a better place together. As always, thank you guys for joining. I can't tell you enough how much excitement is in me of sharing this space in this studio with you. It has been a big dream for us to have a space where we can talk about challenging things and where we can grow together. So again, welcome to the Moxie Studio. And as I always say, I'll see you next week, friends. Moxie on. I love that you were able to join me today, and I'm grateful for the community at the Moxie Podcast that continues to grow. To make this show even better, I would love if you could take some time to leave a review, take a screenshot of this episode, share it on your stories, and don't forget to tag the Moxie Podcast. I would love to find a way to connect with you. Until next week, friends, Moxie on.